Let's analyze this quick and decisive game. Opening analysis, Queen's Pawn Game, unusual variation, / Pseudo-Van Geet opening. Opening name. This game begins with 1, d4, d5, 2, nc3, nc6, while the PGN suggests Van Geet opening, AOO, the sequence of moves 1, d4, d5, 2. nc3 is more accurately a variation of a Queen's Pawn Game. The Van Geet opening typically refers to 1, nc3, so this is a transposition, or perhaps a unique and very aggressive line within the Queen's Pawn Game, mimicking some ideas of the Van Geet with the early knight development to c3. Strategy and tactics in this opening. White's strategy, unusual early aggression. Early knight development and attack. White immediately develops the knight to c3, and then to b5, aiming to put early pressure on black's c7 pawn. This often involves tactical ideas, like the knight fork on c7, as seen in this game. Disrupting black's king safety. The early nx-c7+ is a pure gambit to win material, but it significantly compromises white's own development and leaves the king exposed. Drawbacks. This approach is highly risky. Sacrificing development for a pawn in the early opening, especially when it involves exposing one's own king, is usually unsound unless there's a clear forced follow-up. It severely delays white's castling and piece coordination. Black's strategy against early attacks. Maintain king safety, if possible. Black needs to quickly assess threats to the king and prioritize bringing it to safety. Rapid development and counterattack. When white makes aggressive, non-developing moves, black should focus on rapid piece development, especially with tempo-gaining checks or threats. Exploiting white's king exposure. If white's king is left in the center, black should aim to open lines towards it and unleash a quick attack. Move-by-move commentary. 1. d4. White begins with 1, d4, a very solid and common opening move. It establishes central control and opens lines for the queen and dark-squared bishop, aiming for a positional game. 1. d5. Black responds symmetrically with 1 d5, mirroring white's central control and staking a claim in the d5 square. This is a fundamental reply in the Queen's Pawn Game. 2. nc3. White develops the knight to 2. nc3. This develops a piece and supports the central d4 pawn. While less common than nf3, it's a perfectly playable developing move. 2. nc6. Black develops the knight to nc6, bringing another piece into play and supporting the d5 pawn. Both sides are developing their knights and controlling central squares. 3. bf4. White develops the light-squared bishop to 3. bf4. This places the bishop on an active diagonal, where it eyes black's c7 pawn and potentially the d6 square. 3. nf6. Black develops the knight to 3. nf6, bringing another piece into play and preparing to castle kingside. This is a standard and strong developing move. 4. nb5. White moves the knight to 4. nb5. This is a very aggressive and unusual move. The knight immediately attacks black's c7 pawn, which is currently undefended, and eyes a potential knight fork on c7. 4 e6. Black plays 4 e6, opening a diagonal for the dark-squared bishop and preparing to develop it. This also defends the f7 square and the d5 pawn. However, it doesn't defend c7. 5. nxc7+. White goes for it. 5. nxc7+ delivers a fork on black's king and rook. This move wins the exchange, a rook for a knight, for white. A very aggressive and surprising tactical shot in the early opening. 5. kd7. Black moves the king to 5, kd7 to get out of check. This is an unusual place for the king, as it's now exposed in the center, but it's the only way to avoid losing the queen after losing the rook. Black has sacrificed the rook, but the king is now active. 6. nxa8. White captures the rook with 6. nxa8. White is now up in exchange, but the knight on a8 is completely out of play and will take time to get back into the game. More importantly, white's king is still uncastled, and black's pieces are developing with tempo. 6. qa5+. Black delivers a powerful check with 6. qual5+. This move attacks white's king, which is still in the center, and forces it to move. Black is rapidly developing pieces and creating immediate threats. 7. c3. White blocks the check with 7. c3. This moves the c-pawn, which now takes away the d4 square from the queen and opens up the b1h7 diagonal. It's a necessary defensive move. 7. b flat 4. Black develops the bishop to 7. b flat 4. This is a devastating check. The bishop pins White's c3 pawn to the king, and now White is in serious trouble. White is forced to deal with this check. 8. cxb4. White is forced to capture the bishop with 8. cxb4. This gets White out of check, but it also opens the b file for Black's queen. White's pawn structure is now very weak. 8. nxb4. Black recaptures with 8. nxb4, bringing the knight to a very active square. The knight attacks White's c2 pawn and is ready to jump to d3. Black has sacrificed a rook, but has gained a very strong attack. 9. bd2. White develops the bishop to 9. bd2, trying to block the b file and defend the c2 pawn. However, White's king is still exposed. 9. ne4. Black moves the knight to 9. ne4, a very strong central square. The knight attacks White's d2 bishop and also eyes the f2 pawn. Black's pieces are swarming White's king. 10. bxb4. White captures the knight with 10. bxb4, taking a piece. However, this opens up the b file even further for Black's queen. White is still behind in development and king safety. 10. qxb4+. Black delivers another check with 10. qxb4+. This check is very powerful, as White's king has no safe squares. 11. qd2. White is forced to block the check with 11. qd2. This puts the queen in front of the king, but it also puts it in a very vulnerable position. 11. qxd2 #. And that's it. Checkmate. 11. qxd2 # delivers the final blow. Black's queen, supported by the knight on e4, delivers a beautiful and swift checkmate. A truly devastating and quick victory for Black. Summary of the opening phase. This game featured an incredibly aggressive and ultimately unsound approach by White in the opening. While White managed to win an exchange with the nxc7+ fork, the cost was severe. White's development was completely abandoned. The knight became stranded on a8, and most critically, White's king was left naked in the center of the board. Black's response was exemplary, focusing on rapid development with tempo, checks and attacks, and quickly exploiting White's king's vulnerability. The combination of early checks and powerful piece activity led to a stunningly quick checkmate for Black. This game serves as a strong warning against premature material grabs at the expense of king safety and development.